All right, y'all. So today's going to be the first day we are beginning a class. We're going to go through one of these guided courses, specifically for JavaScript. Not these. If y'all can all open your IDEs, Visual Studio Code. If you're on a Mac, Command Space, type in Visual Studio Code. You should see it come up. If you are on a PC, there should be a little toolbar at the bottom that opens up, kind of like this menu does, and be able to search for Visual Studio Code. Otherwise, you can also have it on your desktop, locked in these toolbars, anything like that. Helpful ways to get there. All right. Did y'all do the homework? I know Angelica did.
Yes.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Malcolm. Can y'all please tell me what y'all learned between the connection between HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? Give me real quick ones.
They form the front end design of a website.
Good, good, good. Angelica, Nolan, if you had the chance to review the document, which hopefully you did, you can also answer because it was on the at the end of the document. So I'm looking for quick answers. Arnelia, Angelica. I could not hear you.
The JavaScript handles like the behavior of what goes on. HTML is the structure, and the CSS is the presentation, so how it looks.
Thank you, thank you. That's a very good answer. You said JavaScript handles the behavior, HTML handles the structure, and go again.
The CSS is the presentation, how it looks. The HTML is the structure, and the JavaScript is the behavior on what it does.
We also call CSS the styling, but presentation also works. CSS describes how it's going to look. Does anyone else want to, or we can honestly begin? Let me see if y'all can also feel free to use the chat if you do not want to speak up. But this, again, I gotta reinforce, this is an interactive lesson. It's a course that we have to go through together. I am not an instructor. I am guiding y'all through courses that I'm taking for my own learning, my own betterment. This is a place for you to ask questions, learn together. This got to be collaborative, and you got to make sure you're learning for yourself. This is not a class where you're going to go and get a grade, get a degree, get certifications. You're going to have to do work, and you're going to have to make sure you deeply understand what you're learning and put in the extra time on your own. This is a supplementary class. It is not going to teach you how to code if you do not put any effort in on your own time to do the work, do the research, and make sure you're understanding and learning for yourself. So please use a chat, use a voice, but do not be quiet. That's the one thing I will not allow in this class because this is a lot to learn. With that covered, let's begin. About this course, guide to setting up website, learn about setting up a web business, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Create your own website. Skill level beginner. Total six total hours. 82 lectures across this. And we have 2 hours, well, an hour and a half for today. All right, let's begin.
Learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is going to give you all the fundamentals that you need to know in order to create dynamic websites, interactive websites. The HTML is used for the page structure. The CSS is used to control the way where the web page works. And JavaScript is going to be used to create that dynamic
Sage, you know you're muted, right?
Yeah, I'm aware. Ah, my bad. My bad.
Every single website that you see out there today is a combination of CSS, HTML, and JavaScript rendered out in a browser. There's also backend scripting code, such as PHP and .NET, and these are constructor languages that actually help construct the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that you see. So they're not actually getting rendered out by the browser. The browser is only looking at HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. My name is Lawrence, and I've been a web developer for over 14 years, and I'm going to be sharing my knowledge with you. I'm going to take you through step by step how to begin to design websites, the tools that you need to use to be effective at your website design, how to register domains, how to interact with clients. And I'm going to be giving you all the information you need to know in order to get going quickly, making money online designing websites. After that, we're going to take you through HTML, starting with the very basics of HTML and working through all the fundamental concepts of HTML, everything from page structure to templates to commonly used tags, how to apply images, and so on. Throughout this course, I'm going to be developing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code using an editor called Dreamweaver. Also going to be using Aptana, which is an open source editor. Dreamweaver does have a cost involved to it. And we're also going to be taking you through Codepen.io, where you can actually develop HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code directly on the website and see how the output looks in the design window. So I've got it structured here where I've got the design window on the right-hand side and the code on the left-hand side. So now I can select any one of this code and I can add styling to it. I can add JavaScript to it and so on. And you can see that as I type in the code, we see that their change takes place on the right-hand side within the design window. So in the CSS, we're going to be walking you through all the different CSS values and syntax that you can use in order to structure your HTML and add styling to your HTML code. We're going to be talking about divs and spans, talking about the difference between inline styling, on-page styling, external styling, as well as we're going to talk about the box model and how the box model works, working with backgrounds and using selectors in order to select different elements that are available within HTML. Afterwards, we're going to be talking about JavaScript and how you can use JavaScript to create dynamic interaction on your website. So whether we're clicking a button and we're running a JavaScript, a simple built-in JavaScript function, or we're building out our own JavaScript functions, we're going to be taking you through step by step how to declare variables, how to work with functions, how to make calculations within JavaScript, as well as how to use conditional statements, such as the one that I have here below. I have an example of a function, as well as declaring variables. And we're also going to be getting into switches, calculations, loops, and arrays and objects. So all of the basic core elements that you need to know in order to be able to write JavaScript. The source files are also included, and it's encouraged that you do follow along and you do practice with the exercises. We've also included several practice exercises throughout the course. And also we're going to have videos that are going to talk you through how to work with and how to solve the practice exercises that are included within the course. We're also including links to resources so that you could download your own resources in order to create your own web content and web pages. So everything that you need to know and to have to get going is included within this course.
All right. Let's move forward now that we understand what we're going to be seeing. Give us a nice little quick presentation, an example of what it looks like to code in CSS, JavaScript, and HTML.
Next lecture, we've included a downloadable resource file, and this resource file is going to be packed full of really useful links. So first of all, we've got Aptana, and this is actually the code editor that I'd had open in the previous lesson. So this is a very useful open source code editor. So you can download it and you can actually use it for free. So this is the website here, and it's one of the more popular ones that gets used. There's also Sublime. So with Sublime, it's you can use it, but you do have to purchase it. They're gonna have a purchase link that's gonna pop up. So it is a full version that you do get with the download. So you can.
I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit because I'm trying to see if he's talking about anything other than editors. We already set up our editor from last class.
And either keep clicking to keep using it or purchase it to get rid of that purchase option. It's got FTP inside of it. There's also Atom and PS Pad and a whole bunch of other ones. So also there's online editors. So the one that we're looking at, Codepen, to include libraries. So if you want to include Bootstrap, you can really easily add Bootstrap to your project. Bootstrap is really useful because it adds some really good styling, more code editors, and there's a whole bunch. I encourage you to find one, get familiar with it, and use it throughout the course as well. So it's a great place to begin earning some money while you're doing programming. So you can do HTML and CSS once you go through the courses.
We'll hear that part.
Another screen that I have open here is Fiverr. So Fiverr is a website that you're probably familiar with that you can actually buy and sell web services on. So it's a great place to begin earning some money while you're doing programming. So you can do HTML and CSS once you go through the courses. Then you can start taking on some projects that are HTML and CSS and begin to even make some money while you're learning and practicing the code. And with HTML and CSS, it gives you all of the knowledge that you need in order to start creating and doing web design. This course is going to cover front-end web development, so also known as client-side development. We're going to be producing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for websites and web applications. I've just got open the wiki definition of front-end web development, and it's also got some definitions here for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So if you want to read up more about it, we're going to include the link as well as some of these details in the upcoming PDF. So HTML is short for hypertext markup language, and this is the basic backbone language of the web. So if you even go to Wikipedia here, you can see that their source, it's all, so they've got their HTML here, they've got all more HTML down here, they've got links to their CSS, they've also got a few other links out here to some PHP. And then up here, they've got script, so they've got some JavaScript here. So these three are gonna be what you're able to see. So that's CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. And every single web page that you look at is gonna be comprised of at least HTML, usually CSS, and JavaScript as well. And if you ever want to see the source code of any website, you can go to any website, you can right click and you can do view page source or control U on a Windows machine. And you can see all of the source code of any web page. So even for the web page that we were currently working on in the previous lesson, open it up and you can see all of the HTML code there, link out to the CSS and we can see the CSS as well. And if it had JavaScript, we could link out and we could see the JavaScript file as well. So what happens is that the browser takes this code, it reads through it from top to bottom and renders out the code as indicated within the web page. It's also encouraged as you work through this course, feel free to ask questions, to message me anytime. I'm also planning on constantly updating content within this course as new content becomes available. So this course will be growing and expanding as new content becomes available.
All right. Any questions so far before we move on? Yeah, I'm gonna download the PDF and put it in the chat. Any questions? Yes, no.
You're putting it in the chat or the document?
I'm gonna put it in both the document and the chat. Not this chat. I'm talking about the iMessage group. All right, moving forward. We're not gonna watch how to choose an editor. Web design tools for development.
In the previous lesson, we talked about running HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So oftentimes you might require also installing MySQL. So that's if you have a database running, PHP, as well as you might require a local server to run on your system. So if that's a requirement for your coding and your development, you can go ahead and download Xampp. So this is probably one of the easiest ones to get up and running quickly. So you don't really need a lot of technical knowledge. You just go over to their website, apachefriends.org, and then just hit download. So if you're on Windows, Linux, or OS X, so pick the correct version and then just download it and install it. And once you do have that running, you're able to open up their control panel. And with pretty much little configuration, you can set that control panel to start and to run your applications on localhost. So what that means is that this application will run as a server locally on your machine. And this allows you to develop with these other coding languages that would normally require a server to respond back the code. So these are not interpreted by the browser. It's written by the backend, and the browser, again, only sees that front end code. It sees that CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. And the only thing with Xampp that you should have to configure if you are running in a different directory, so by default, wherever you install it, that's where you can work with the files. But if you've got several projects on the go and you're going to have to switch between different folders, so the best way, easiest way to do that is just hit this config, go over to Apache HTTPD config, and that's going to open up in WordPress. And go down, it's probably line 243 or somewhere around there. So what you're looking for is this document root as well as directory. And this is going to be where your root directory is. So this is where localhost is going to point to. So this one you have to change to match wherever your website files are, wherever your root files. So you can see here when we had opened that up and we went to websites, web design source, that's where my index file is going to be located. So all I have to do is just type that in there like this. And this one like this, save it. And now when I have to stop it and restart it. And now when I go to localhost, and just to look at the website over here, so this is what it's going to be displayed at by default on your within your browser. So again, it's skipping over all this meta information and source information, and just looking at this body content and whatever content it has to output there. So you can see here, we've got a basic boilerplate that we're using for HTML5, and we've got our content, we've got our navigation, our footer, and our header. So when we actually go over to the web page now with localhost, so now we've got Xampp running, and we've pointed it to the same directory where our index page is, and all we have to do is go over to localhost, and we can see that we're running the same that same location. And this is an index by default. It's going to take your index page as your root. So if you don't have an index, it's not going to be able to find anything. It's going to come up with page not found, or depending again on your server configuration, it might look for default or index.php or whatever all the different roots, possible roots are. So usually there's an order of roots. So the server will take a look at and see the files and see if it's available. And if it is available, then it'll just by default render that page. So that's what we've got here. And that's what we're going to be showing you throughout this lesson. And again, it's not 100% necessary if it's all you're doing is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But setting up a local host really does speed things up, as opposed to, especially if you're doing server-side code, as opposed to having to upload and download your code constantly from a server. This really does speed everything up and gives you the ability to run that same code, that same server machine locally. And then whatever changes you do make. So if I was to make a change like this, I can quickly go back over, refresh the page, and I see that my change is visible. Also, the good thing about Dreamweaver is I do have this ability where I can do the split screen, and I can see a preview of the browser content here on the right-hand side. So this is one of the good reasons that, especially when I'm doing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it's really easy to kind of see these split screens with Dreamweaver. I think some of the other editors might have that as well. I know that the Microsoft one had that, where you're able to do that split screen and you're able to see the browser preview. But if you do have two monitors, you can always have the page open, the local host open on one, and use the other one for your coding. And then whenever, of course, whenever you make changes to the code, you can just refresh it. There's also some online options. So if you are
Let's see what's happening here. What's happening?
like Codepen, and there's a whole bunch of them as well. You want to be able to preview your code. You can go to websites like Codepen, and there's a whole bunch of them as well that you can edit code live. This is just an example of Codepen, and all you have to do is new pen. You can create an account as well, and then just go over here, copy your code, go back to the Codepen interface, and here you can add in your CSS. It's got a whole bunch of styling that's by default, and then also really good that it gives you error messages. So yeah, so you don't normally need to put stuff that's not within the body, because again, this is just for visual purposes, and this is why it's telling you this error message, because you normally wouldn't put all of this stuff in. This is just when you're, this is just more for visual sake. So, and also you're tying in that CSS. So if you were to tie in any kind of CSS coding here, you can do that here as well. And then you can see that right away it does update that. And that goes for the JavaScript as well. That we've got the JavaScript here. So if you were to type in any kind of JavaScript, you could type that in there as well. So if you did something like alert, this would show that alert once the page runs. And you see how easy and instant that is. So again, a lot of different solutions. So if you are working on a little piece of code and you want to just quickly have a preview of it, make some updates and changes, you can always use these online editors as well.
Please let me know, how helpful is it to learn about these secondary tools for development? Is it helping y'all kind of picture how y'all are gonna code, or is it just confusing you?
Seeing them all like side by side definitely gives me an idea. I dabbled with Java and just like learning all that stuff, but seeing like CSS and the other thing, I forgot what it was. Next to it,
HTML.
yeah, seeing all that together, like, and how they interact is definitely a good visual. So like the workflow looks like it makes sense.
That's dope. That's dope. All right, let's keep moving on. Web designer client questions. Actually, I do want to see that. Is it not downloaded? I gotta make sure I got that other one downloaded too then. Not this one, this one. And then web dev resources. I'll download this as well and throw it in the doc. All right, let's see what these web designer questions are. Top questions to ask before beginning a web project. The more you understand about the project, the easier it will be to complete it. What do you want to achieve with your website? Find the purpose. Who is your audience and what message do you want to give them? What makes you different from your competitors? Describe the style of website you want. Are there sites with style that you really like? Do you have colors you want to use, company branding, logos, and images? What do you like most and like least about your current website? What's on your competitor's site that you want? What do you like about your competitor's site? Budget and what resources you already have. What is the most important thing to accomplish with this site? Understand the additional expectations and specs about the client's needs. Clients will have different requirements depending on their expectations from you. Make sure you set the expectations in the beginning. For example, who will manage the content, how many pages they need, who will provide the wording and images, where it will be hosted, and so on. Get the ideas from the client, and they put that in bold. Ask the client where are the keywords best. What? Oh man, I don't think this person speaks English, but ask the client what other keywords best describe what they are looking for. Get 3 to 5 keywords and use those words to brainstorm more. The more you know about your client, the better you understand them. Doing my best to make these make sense. So this is more so leaning into the business side of I guess the business logic of setting up a website you might be interested in making. Many times people come to me and they're like, Sage, I have an idea for a website. I want to do this or do that. And generally the idea sounds like Uber for clothes, or, you know, laundry service, or or sell something that honestly could be a Shopify website. So having these questions kind of sets you apart from majority of people's ideas and allow you to kind of like intelligently figure out how you're going to make a website that can compete with Ubers or Lyfts or whatever. So yeah, especially the question of what makes it different. What makes you different from your competitors? That's a huge question, because many times we are doing repeats. All right, let's see. Web design process questions. This sounds like it's more for the developer side. Sheesh. Let's see. On the wrong Wi-Fi.
When you're ready to begin designing websites, there's some top questions that you got to remember to ask any client before you begin. You want to know what they want to achieve with their website. What is the purpose of their website and why, and what do they want to get out of it? Who is their audience and what message do they want to give to them? What makes them different from their competitors? Describe the style of website they want. Are there any sites that they really like? Do they have colors, branding, logos, and images that they want to use? What do they most like about their current site? What do they least like about it? What's on competitors' sites that they like and what don't they like? What's important to them? Budget and resources, what do they already have? And any additional expectations, such as site management, number of pages, and so on. It's really important to understand the needs of the customer, know their budget, and ask those important questions. Usually by asking keywords, this gives you a better idea of where to start the design process. Get 3 to 5 keywords and use those words in order to brainstorm more. Get more ideas out of the words. Those words will give you direction. and help you better understand how to begin the design process. Those keywords should be a summary from the client's point of view. Now you can use those keywords to Google search, do an image search on those keywords to better get an idea of what your client is looking for. If they're looking for fresh, lively, find out what types of colors and information is also being provided. Use those again for the brainstorming process in order to really begin that design process. The more you understand about your client, the better. Remember, the client is looking to you for guidance. So once you've determined that you want to have a website, the next step, if you don't already have a domain name picked out, is to go and get a domain name. Now, I like using domain.com. Of course, you can register your domain name anywhere and any domain registrar. So there's tons of them out there. And usually it's best to go with whatever web hosting plan you're using to register the domain name there. But the reason I go to domain.com is because it's got this really neat tool where it's got domain ideas. Because more than likely, if you're picking out a domain name, your domain name is, especially if you're looking for something short with some good wording in it, it's more than likely already going to be taken. And you can see here that they do have domains that are for sale. So they have roughly about the price that they're asking for. So test with me, I just put in testme.com. And of course that was taken. So they did provide some other test me domains that are available with different domain extensions other than .com. But more than likely, if you are setting up a domain name, you want to use .com. So here we've got a bunch of domain ideas, as well as other ones that you could purchase. So if you want to purchase testwithme.com, this is the price that they're asking for it. So you can also go down here, and these are all domains that are currently available. So as you can see, again, there's not a lot of .coms available. So they're suggesting ones that are slightly off, like .nets, .orgs. And again, you could go through these to get more ideas in order to register your domain name. Important thing is when you're picking a domain name that it's something that's easy to remember, maybe try to keep it as short as possible, something that's not too complicated and that it's not hard for people to remember, because you do want to be able to just say your domain name and also avoid lettering, like if you've got test the event. So you don't want to have these kind of double letters either, because that also leads to confusion when you are saying the domain name or when they're reading it, that there are these two letters. Make sure that it is descriptive as well, in order for people to be able to understand what this domain is going to be about. So this really doesn't say anything about it. And also make sure that it's adaptable to your content, that it does fit with the content of your site. So you don't want to do something like football.com if you've got nothing to do with football. And what a domain name really is this is just the name that people are going to be able to type in as this top level URL up here at the top level domain there, and the URL in order to find your website. And this is going to be translated through the name servers. So the way the internet works is that you can type in this domain name and it translates into an IP address. Just to illustrate that, if we do something like ping domain, what it does is try to ping out to this IP address, and it goes through all the different routes, bounces around in order to be able to understand what server is serving up this IP address. Now, some of them will have it blocked, so I can try to ping Google. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but yeah, so with Google, it does work. And we see that we ping google.com, it translates into an IP address, and this is the IP address of Google servers that's hosting google.com. And this is the same idea that you're trying to do with your web hosting. So you find a domain name, and you need to have a name server that's going to be able to translate that name into a readable IP address. And that IP address is of where the IP address of the server of where your content is hosted. When it comes to hosting, there's a lot of hosts out there. And when you are picking a host, try to look for good uptime, size, bandwidth, customer support, and the ease of use. And once you've looked at all those factors, then you can determine which host company to go with.
All right, so y'all understand domains, correct?
Yeah, that was pretty straightforward.
All right, good to hear, good to hear. Any questions? All right, then let's continue.
So if you are going to be creating content for the website, it's important to understand and go by the Webmaster Guidelines for content creation, because you don't want to be making spammy content. You don't want to have errors. You want to make sure that your content is useful and informative. So make sure that you're launching a website and you are getting that information out. So if you had a restaurant or a business, that you've got the hours of operation and that it's easy to contact and that there's updates about that business. So the more valuable and more useful it is, the better your site will rank. And credibility is also important. So when you do go to create that content, make sure that that content is credible, it's high quality, and most importantly, that that's engaging content. Also, make sure that you go over to the Webmaster Guidelines here and just quickly read over all of this information, just to make sure that you do understand what's good, what's quality, what's to avoid, what techniques to avoid. And a lot of these techniques, these are just over the years, just different ways people have tried to game the system. So you don't want to be gaming the system, because the consequences are, in the long term, are very bad. If Google detects or believes that you're trying to gain any kind of content on their web, as a website, you're trying to gain their search rankings, they're going to penalize you for it. So always make sure that you've got these basic principles. Make it for users, not for search engines. Don't deceive your users. Avoid tricks, and think about what's going to make your website unique, valuable, and engaging. So make sure you do read through these guidelines if you are going to be creating the content of the website. And also there's some information here on technical guidelines, and this will help with SEO, such as it gives you a better understanding of what Google's looking for and how they're indexing the website. Because again, if you are creating that content online, you want to make sure that it's found, and that's why SEO is important. So things like a sitemap and just overall setting up these, using these guidelines is going to be a good starting point for web development. And there's also a bunch of tools that are going to be really useful. So one of them is analytics. So if you have a Google account, it's very easy to sign up. Just go to Google Analytics and sign up for an account there and add in your website. And this would give you a whole bunch of information. This is, again, it's free, provided by Google, and it gives you a whole bunch of information on what's happening on your website. You can really dig down into the website and how people are converting and how people are using the website. There's also a conversion area here that you can set conversion goals. You've got your audience information here. You've got some real-time information, intelligence events, and just a whole bunch of great information to really help you work with your website and optimize it. So this is really a must-have tool for the reporting. And when we did set up our initial structure of the website, we did have this where it had the analytics that was placed into it. So when we go down here, we see that this is the analytics code. So all you really have to do is just place this on your website, replace the UA, which is the analytics ID. So they're all going to start with UA, and then it's going to be a number. So pull out that analytics ID number for the website, and you can place that within that code, and that's going to begin tracking. So that's all you have to do. Just copy out your ID number for the website, and from there you can track over the code. And you can get that by going over to admin and selecting out the property that you want to use, and you get your tracking ID there. So that's all you have to enter in, and then that's going to allow you to track. So along with that, there's also Webmaster Tools. So Bing has a Webmaster Tools, and this gives you more insight on what's happening on your website. It also gives you some information about keywords, traffic, and a whole bunch more information. And also Google has a Webmaster Tools, so you can access that as well. And again, that's going to give you some insights about what people are using, what keywords people are using, if there's any errors or problems with your site. That's all going to be included within these Webmaster Tools. So again, these are going to be really good resources to have and to be able to use to really improve your web experience and web design experience.
So this, again, is more so on the business side. Google SEO, search engine optimization, pretty much allow your website to get hit more. The analytics / tracking, websites use data to optimize or make it as hard as possible for users not to engage with their website. For example, Twitter wants you to be addicted to social media. So does Facebook and all of them. They want you to be on their website as much as possible. Like, that's what they're developing for. So analytics allows you to utilize data and figure out how to get people more more engaged with your website. Along with selling that data, you can also profit off of that. So these are some cool little side business aspects. I think this is helpful per se for understanding on a higher level. But I do want us to touch code before we go too far into this. So I'm going to look at the table of content. All right, good. The next section is HTML. All right, we can watch this for the final overview of web design and website building, and then we'll hop into some code with the last hour we have left. Sounds good? Everyone still awake?
That sounds good, man.
Sounds good.
When determining what type of content and what type of how to target your audience better with the content, you can use a service called google.com trends. And what this website does is this basically lets you know the search trends that are happening online. So it's really real time. It's past 24 hours. You can see the most popular search terms and search phrases that are being searched for. So here you've got a breakdown of categories. You've got a breakdown of countries. So you can really break down that content to be able to isolate and pick out your content properly. So if I was to go to Canada and business topics, we see that, yes, here BMW right now, that's trending. And as well, you can type in your own topic. So if you had a construction company, to see here that interest over time, so it has been decreasing. They also have this what's called forecast. You can see where they're forecasting the trend to be going up. And sometimes you can pick out trends that in certain points it does drop down. So you can see that constantly in December, there's all these drop downs in construction. So we've got a comparison as well, so heavy equipment and just overall interest in time. Then constantly in December, you see these drop downs. Now we can add an additional term as well to do a comparison. And when we scroll down, we can see that the breakdown of regional interest for that term. And we can see here that what's rising, top additional terms, queries that are being put in, the top queries. And this will give you a good idea for.
Jeez. Man, my internet does not like me ever.
As if you do have an AdWords account, you can do a keyword list there as well and search out keywords.
Oh my gosh. Oh man.
And really being able to identify and understand the audience and what purpose they are, what's the reason, what they're querying for, and what they're looking for online. Because that's what you really want to do, is answer these questions, these queries, and provide answers on your website for those queries. For the purposes of this course, we're going to be using a code editor called Dreamweaver. There are also code editors such as Notepad++. And as you can see here, we've got Notepad++ opened up on the same file that we have within Dreamweaver. So the purposes of the course, we're going to be using Dreamweaver, but you can also use Notepad++. It's an open source editor, and there's a whole bunch of additional editors that you can get to work with your HTML code. And as you can see here, even in Notepad++, it actually takes those opening and closing tags, and you can open up the different tag elements within the menu here on the left-hand side. And then in addition to that, we're going to be using Chrome as our browser. So if we also have a web server, a local host running on our machine. So that's why we're able to go to course.website. And this just translates going over to our local host machine. So it's actually not necessary to set up a local host if you're doing HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, because this is all front-end code and it's run through the browser. And the browser is the one that actually interprets the code that's being output. So you can actually go over to your files and you can simply open up the file that you've created. So we're creating by default the starting page for web servers usually is index. So again, this is dependent on what the web server structure is, but by default, usually you're going to start off with the starting page of index. And as you can see here, when I go to the root directory, it's going to look for that index file. And when it sees that index file, that's the one it's going to display. So this is going to be the same thing as typing in index.html, same thing, but this is just showing us the root file. And again, you can go to the documents directory or directly. So as I've done here, where I just go to the path where the file is located, and you can see here that the output is still the same. It's actually outputting it the same way. So I just had that zoom there. So really with HTML, and to practice HTML and CSS and JavaScript, you don't need a lot of tools on your computer. You can literally do it with the browser and download any editor. You can even use TextPad or any other content editor, Microsoft Word as well. And there's a whole bunch of options for different editors, open source editors. So I do encourage you to download one and start working and practicing the code, because it is important to practice the code that we're talking about in order to get familiar with what each different tag is going to do and how that functions and outputs within the browser. And especially when we get into more complex CSS, it's going to be important to be able to understand and visually be able to see all the different elements that are available within your HTML document. This is one of the web pages that we're going to be going through and showing you how to build within this course. This is a sample of the website. And when we look at the code, we see that the HTML structure first opens up with HTML, has a head tag, and then we've got some CSS styling in here, and we're going to be going through this as well. And then over here, we've got some metadata. And this metadata actually just tells the browser what type of content to expect. Over here, we've got what's called Viewport. So this allows that content to be more mobile friendly. What it's doing, it's taking the device width and it's doing the initial scale to 1. So in order to have content resized for mobile devices and smaller screens, you need to include this viewport within your meta up here at the top. And also with character sets, so we can include it up here, or we can include it as a string with this meta information here. So we can actually just remove that out right now as well. And then over here with titles, so we've got our opening and closing titles, and this is a bunch of styling that we're going to be getting into later. And then we've got our body here, and footer, header, navigation, and this is our main section that contains our content. And then we've also have a div with content here as well. And over here, you might notice that I've got this kind of grayed out text. And when I go over to the website, we see that that's actually not showing up. So this is a way to add in comments, and this will help you to guide you through as you're developing, to give you some documentation and information about
Oh man. Might not be the internet.
just over here. I've added in a comment, and again,
What is this?
over here, I've added in a comment, and again, it's not going to display within the browser. This is only visible within the source code, not showing up. So this is a way to add in comments, and this will help you to guide you through as you're developing, to give you some documentation and information about.
Oh man. I think I need a codec pack. You would think they would like link to this if this is such a major thing, or actually make better embedded videos.
Just over here, I've added in a comment, and again, it's not going to display within the browser. This is only visible within the source code when you open that up and when you're looking at your HTML document. And Dreamweaver, the code editor that I'm using, is able to interpret it and understands that this is a comment, this isn't part of the code, so that's why they're graying it out, and it's not as visible as the rest of the content within this HTML document. So in order to comment out, all you have to do is do this less than symbol, the exclamation mark, and 2 minus signs. And then to close it off, again, within that same type of format where we're opening and closing, although this is going to be slightly different where the beginning one has that extra exclamation mark. And the ending here, we've just got dash, dash, and the greater than sign. So that's how you add in comments. And this really does help with documentation of your code as you work through it.
One cool thing is that you can always use command backslash, and that will set some comments in your code in VS Code. Let me show you. So I press command backtick, it comments it out. And for something more so similar, you go to an HTML file. And if I'm trying to make a comment out in HTML, just have that nice little command backtick, backslash. All right. This class. We're not going to download these because they're pretty basic.
Within this lesson, we're going to be going over basic HTML structure, declaration of the document type, how to use tags, opening and closing tags, and 3 of the most common types of tags that you're going to be using to structure your HTML documents. So first off, right here at the top, we're declaring the document type. And this helps the browser interpret what type of document it should be expecting. And then below that, we've got the HTML opening and HTML closing tags. So with HTML, you've got opening and closing tags. So predominantly, most of the tags are going to have opening and closing, as well as you've got these kind of self-closing tags as well, which we're going to get into later within the course. So for now, it's just important to understand that HTML has opening and closing, and any content between these opening and closing tags is considered to be content within that element. So here we've got our opening HTML, closing HTML. So that means all this content here is HTML content. And then just below the HTML, we've got head. So opening head and closing head. And then if you notice here, we've got body, opening, and closing body. So this is a basic structure of an HTML page where we've got head, opening and closing, and body, opening and closing. And the way the browser is going to interpret these 2 elements or these 2 tags is that anything up here is part of the head and anything below here is part of the body. And so this actually is going to get commonly output within the browser. And this is for the viewer to be able to see. So within the head, normally we're going to include title. So here we've just set a title called an HTML template. And as you can see, when we go into our browser, we see that we do have our title displaying there within the tab. And then below that in body, so we've got these opening and closing paragraphs. We've got BRs, which are line breaks, and we've got heading tags. And as you can see within the browser, these paragraph tags, they leave spacing between the different elements. And then the line breaks, they don't leave any additional spacing between them. So you see there's a line break there, a line break there, and a line break at the end of world for all 3 of these. And we see that they don't leave any additional spacing. So it's just essentially the line height. And headings are working similar to the way paragraphs are, that the next element is going to actually go underneath this one. So it's going to operate within a block function, and it's going to leave this spacing between the 2 different elements. So here we've got our heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And with headings, it's important to understand that they go down from 1 being the largest and go all the way over to 6. And this is just a great way to really highlight some content within your HTML code. So again, with HTML, you've got opening, closing tags, you've got line breaks, and again, opening and closing headings. So they're really easy. They're just H1 to anywhere from H1 to 6. And then the basic structure of the document is body and head, and it's all contained within HTML. And that's all you really need to get started building out your HTML code.
Super simple, super simple. This is what
in this lesson, we're going to be talking about some more common HTML tags. And the one that we're going to be talking about in this lesson is going to be ordered lists. So ordered lists are used very commonly. So in combination with CSS, you can do some really cool things with ordered lists. And an ordered list is, just as the name indicates, it's a list of a bunch of items. And the way that we write this code out, and if you notice here at the top, we have an unordered list, and then at the bottom, we have what's called an ordered list. And so when we look at the code, all we're doing is, again, these opening and closing tags. So we've got our unordered list is just a UL and closed by UL. So ordered list is an OL, so ordered list. So it really does make sense. These acronyms do make sense. And UL is unordered list. And LI is list item. So these are all the items that are going to get listed within these ordered lists or unordered lists and ordered lists. And again, these are very commonplace within HTML code, and combined with CSS, you've got a lot of control with what you can do with these lists. And the reason that a lot of you web developers are using these lists is because they're really easy to see, and also it gives you a lot of control with CSS and JavaScript when you work those in with these list items. And with ordered lists, you've got the ability to add different types. So as well with styling, which we're going to get into later as well, we can add an attribute of type, and we can just do type A, and that will allow us to change what these ordered list identifiers are. So here we just did a type A, so it's going to start A, B, C, D. We can also do lowercase, and we can also do these Roman numeral type. And so we can just refresh that. So there are some options with the ordered lists as well. And with unordered lists, you've got the ability to attach style. So this is the same for any attribute, and we're going to get into that in the next lesson, how to use style to really customize the look of your elements. But for now, we can see that when we add in the style, it actually adds this, makes our unordered list look like an ordered list. And we do have a few options here for style. So with Dreamweaver, I've got a bunch of options here in the dropdown, and I can do something like a square as well. And when I go back out and refresh it, I can see that these unordered list now has these square type list indicators or list types. And additional to ordered lists, we want to talk about tables quickly. So tables used to be used quite a bit for styling and positioning different items and different content on web pages. And this was before CSS came along. So CSS has really changed how we do our HTML code. But it is important to understand that tables are still have their usefulness. And a basic table structure is that we've got our opening table, closing table tags. So again, those opening closings, we've got a TR, which is a table row. We've got a TH, which is a table header. And we've got a TD. So this one's a little bit harder to guess. So rows, headers, TD is table data. So these are essentially all the different cells. So if you had another bunch of, another row here, and you'd have again these TDs, so these table datas.
Do y'all have your editors open? If not, we can recreate this together.
I do have my editor open.
So
Mine's open.
All right, dope. Let's create a index.html file. To do that, let's go to VS Code, create a new one. You can type in, there's two ways to do it. Actually, I need a new editor. All right, so you have two options. You can call touch this command line on your command line, not this command line, on your command line, and then type in index.html. Touch will create a new file, and then whatever you put after is going to be the name of it. And then if I look in my Explorer, oh, it's because I'm not in anywhere. Code. Let's see. I did make the index.html file in here though. Actually, I'm assuming y'all do not have a source directory. Source directory, SRC. I'm assuming y'all do not have one made yet.
I have nothing.
No.
All right, so we're also going to call mkdir, which means make directory. If you call mkdir and then type source, well, mine's gonna say file already exists. For you, it's created and the root of your entire computer's directory. All right, then you can call code src and it'll open the folder for Visual Studio Code. Otherwise, you can just simply click open folder. It'll show you a whole bunch. You'll be able to click source. But also, honestly, I just want to see index.html. So I'm just going to open the one that I've been created. It's good for you to build out directories. Make sure your stuff is organized. Having a little source or code, make mkdir code somewhere that you will remember to put the work that you're doing, especially for this course. So in this index.html file, where's Chrome? So we're gonna add some of these. Let's create the table. And there's autocomplete on VS Code to help speed up development. So we're gonna add the table. I'm gonna put TH for table head, TR for table row.
Real quick, Sage, how'd you get that stuff at the bottom?
What stuff at the bottom? Oh, my terminal.
Yeah,
You have VS Code downloaded?
yeah.
All right, you can press Control and then backtick on your keyboard, and it'll open this. You can also look at the top, assuming that you're on a Mac. Click Terminal, click New Terminal, which is showing you the same command for backtick. And then the last way you can do it, man. Oh. Command Shift P and then type in like new terminal. Command Shift P is like all the commands. Create new terminal. So yeah, 3 different options to open the terminal on VS Code.
Appreciate it.
No problem, no problem. So we're gonna have table head is gonna be inside table rows, which makes sense.
Hey, Sage,
Yes.
having a little problems with the make directory in my terminal.
mkdir.
Yes.
All right, what'd you type after it?
That's what I was missing code. Okay.
You can type anything that you want to name your folder. This is just making a directory, which is a folder. And then anything you type after is going to be the name of it. So I'm not giving y'all a specific way to name your directories for this course. You can even name it course or whatever, but just make sure to put everything you're doing that's related to this class in the same thing. So that way you can just like organize your thoughts and be able to quickly find it if you need to look back at it. All right, so table row, table head first. Second. And another cool thing VS Code does, I believe it has preview HTML. Or actually, no. That's you have to go on a website or download that. It has preview markdown. Think about a different specific language. The next thing that we're looking at, all right. Gonna add a comment here too and say table. Unordered list that's what we're seeing here and here. One is an ordered list and one is the unordered list. We're going to create the unordered list. And then everything LI stands for list item. The LI element represents a list item. If its parent is an OL, UL, or menu element, then the element is an item of the parent's element. Otherwise, the list item has no defined list related relationships. So you can also use list item without UL or any wrapping element, but it just won't be linked together. We're gonna say first, and then second. And then we're gonna make an ordered list. So as you can see, there's a lot of learning tools on VS Code. Just if you hover over any element that you're creating, it should give you some additional information. All right. Let's also add the table data to this. So we get a table row, table head, and another row. And then with those, we're going to put table datas. First. Oh man, I keep hitting that. And then one more table row. This time I'm gonna put HTML, I'm gonna put JavaScript. All right, let's continue on and make sure we are trying to code and copy what they're writing as we go along.
So again, this is a basic table structure, and you can really build out your tables. So the first row is going to have the headers, and we go out to our browser, we can see that this is how our basic table is set up. And with adding styling and attributes, we're able to add quite a bit more into the table, how it's going to look. So if you want to add in a border, so the thing with tables is they do have their own attributes, and you can use styling as well. So by default, they do have their own attributes. So we can do table border, and this will add that border around these table items. So it's a little bit easier to see all the different cells that are available within the table. But for the most part, mainly we're going to be using styling to control tables. So we're not going to be using a lot of these table attributes. And as you can see, when we do this drop down, we've got a background option, background color, and a whole bunch of options for the table as well. Within this lesson, we're going to be talking about hyperlinks and how to add images. So this is going to add some additional functionality to your HTML code. So in the past lessons, we've been just talking about HTML code, and it actually hasn't done anything. So there's nothing other than the actual textual content that you're placing, and that's what's showing up within the browser. So here, using hyperlinks, this gives us the ability to add some kind of actionable items within our HTML code. And the way that that's done is that's just done with these H tags. So they're the href tags, and the href is going to be the location where you're linking out to. So I'm just going to link out to Google. And then again, just closing that one off. And then whatever content is going to between these A's is going to be actually the hyperlink itself. So here is how we set up a basic hyperlink. And when we go out to our web page, we just refresh that. We see by default, the hyperlink gets underlined. when we click it, we go out to google.com. So that's all that the hyperlink does, and it adds this additional interactivity to the content that the browser is outputting. And that's going to work the same way for this. So I can actually click this local file. This is the same one that I've opened up just using the path, and it opens up in Google as well. So for a hyperlink, it's relatively straightforward. The href is just the URL path. Now you do have additional attributes that you can add in here. And as you can see here, Google or Dreamweaver is giving me a bunch of attributes. And one of the ones that's commonly used is setting the target. So by default, if you don't set a target, it's just going to go to self. So we see that we do have that option here to set it to self, but by default, it goes to self. And what self means is that it goes to the document, which is within the same frame as the one that was clicked. So that's why when we had that Google opening up, we actually moved to that and moving off of our page. And another common one is blank. And what blank does is this opens up the document in a new window or tab. And then there are a few other ones as well. So there's parent and top. And those are used when parent is, when you're trying to break out a frame and go to the parent window. And top is when you want to do a full body window. So those aren't as commonly used, but you should be aware of them as well. So now when we go back out here, we refresh it, we click our hyperlink, we see that Google actually opens up in a separate page. And that's exactly what we wanted for this, because we want to keep users within our website and we don't readily want them.
Means I'm having worse luck today.
It's very important to understand that if you do need it to go off, you should be including that as well.
All right, but yeah, let's try this. I also want to show y'all, because it's 7:30, we don't have much time. I do want to show y'all another way to play with HTML. You can use Chrome Developer Tools, which is what he should have showed us in the beginning, because this is a way better tool than half the things he showed us. Codepen is also dope. I'm not gonna lie, Codepen is very good. Codepen.io. So make sure we check these two out before. But yeah, cool thing in Chrome's Developer Tools is you get to play with HTML literally on the page. So the title is going to be up here, this part of the page. So let me, no, actually, I think this loads on, oh, actually, no. Okay, cool. Watch this. Front end dev course, shout out to the class. And then boom. So we can literally play with this HTML on the actual page. And this will allow us to actually get our hands on the actual structure of a whole page. So as you can see, with any HTML page, generally you start with the doc type, and then you wrap it all in an HTML tag that could be filled with a whole bunch of other features. JDN, JavaScript, HTML. Oh wait, MDN. No, docs. There we go. Struggling to find the Mozilla docs. So Mozilla docs also have a great section for understanding HTML. So before this week is over, I'm gonna put this in the doc. Actually today I'm gonna put this in the doc. Before this week is over, I expect y'all to go through this and try out some of the beginner tutorials. And then when we come back next class, we're gonna review a little bit of what we did with HTML. HTML is pretty minimal to understand and learn, but it's something we most definitely have to learn. So this is something y'all should definitely play with. But let's run through this course continue.
Now, another type of tag is the image tag, and this is used if you want to add in an image within your HTML code. So commonly, So just type in a source. So all it is image source, and it's just another one of those self-closing tags where we don't have an opening image and a closing image. We just have all that information contained within that image itself. And images are also inline tags. So which means that they're not going to create a separate line of code. So if you place that image within your text here, this is going to keep in line with this text, as opposed to paragraphs and additional tags that we're going to be looking at later that actually are going to break that and drop us into a new line. So images are inline, they stay in line with the rest of the content within that element. So with the image, I've just pasted in a source for the image. And this is just a website that allows you to pick up, it's Lorem Pixel. If you're not familiar with Lorem text, so this is just basically space holding text, and Lorem Pixel is the same thing. It's a space holder image. And here I can set the size of the image that I want returned. So height and width. So we're going to keep it at a width of 400, a height of 200, and we're going to select in the category sports. And now when we go out to our page, we're going to see that we should have an image here within line of the text. So there's our image showing up, and actually I can make that a little bit smaller. And as we had mentioned before, that this image is again in line with the additional text that surrounds it. And that's important to remember, that images don't break. If you want to break out an image, you can do it within styling, or you can do it within your HTML code by adding additional tags that do that break and that block coding style. And the really neat thing about images is, let's say you want to have a clickable image, all you would have to do is move that over between the href tags. And now when I refresh it, this image now is a hyperlink and it's linking out to Google. Again, these are going to be very common. Hyperlinks are all over the place within web development, as well as images are really commonplace. So these two combined are going to be some of the most used tags within your HTML. In the previous lessons, we've talked about different block and different inline elements, such as the images were inline, the paragraphs and headings were blocks, which just basically means that it starts on a new line. So here we've got an example of if you wanted to set a default block element, we use div. And if we want to set a default inline element, we use span. And when we go over to refresh our page, we see what the difference here is, that the block ends here, so the div would start and end, and it starts on a new line automatically, as opposed to span, which actually doesn't start on a new line, but you can see that it does include the spacing between the different elements. And you can also use them within combinations here. So if we've got we can have a bunch of spans within those blocks or within those divs. You can see how that turns out within the coding. That it just shows up within there. And this is going to become really important when we start working with CSS, because we're going to see that these divs and these spans are going to be very commonly used to divide up different elements and create different elements within the HTML code, to break them up and to add additional styling and CSS to these different elements. Within HTML, we also have the ability to do formatting, and the formatting is inline. So now we've just added these strong tags around world. And what that's going to do is that's going to emphasize world. So you can also do EM and then the closing EM. And I believe I could do that this way. So opening and closing EMs. And then here we've got strong. So when we refresh this page, we see what's happened here, that EM has made this italic look to the text, and strong has essentially bolded it out. So you also have the option to do bold, but more commonly we're using strong. But bold is going to do essentially the same thing that strong does. So when we go back out and we refresh it, we see that they're both bolded there. It's important to be aware of these, but generally, again, depending on what your requirements are for the code, you might be using styling instead of adding in these different formatting elements within your HTML code. And again, you're always focusing on that readability factor, that you want your code to be readable. And when you do divide up the CSS, you take all of this out and divide it up within CSS, HTML, it's going to be a lot more readable code. But it is important to remember that these are there in case you do need to use them within your HTML documents. Within your HTML document, you're also able to add this style attribute. Now, we had briefly looked at this earlier, and style, essentially what that is that's CSS. So it gives you the ability to align the content, and we literally have a whole ton of information here. So we can add a border, we can do solid border, we can do a color to it. And then we can just do a width of it as well. So we're just going to do this gives us the ability to add in CSS right in line with our HTML code. So basically what we've done here around this div, we've created a border, a solid border. It's I guess a reddish border with 1 pixel in width. We can also change this pixel to make it wider. And when we refresh our page, we see that in fact, indeed, our border has been added. And if you look here, it has a whole bunch of white space that's here. And this goes to what we were talking about earlier about these divs being blocks. And a block essentially takes up that whole space. So it doesn't allow that inline content to be pushed right next to it. So it has actually taken up all that space. And that's why this border goes all the way over to the right-hand side, effectively taking up all the space that's available on the web page. And there are literally a whole bunch of things that you can do with style. And if you want to add style to one of these inline elements, you can do something like style. So we looked at borders, and maybe here we want to do font size. And we want to make this font really big. So font size 18. And essentially, if you are familiar with CSS, this is CSS that we're doing here, but we're adding it inline within our elements right within the HTML code. So again, style, and maybe we'll do a few more here. So the style options, and that's one of the good things about Dreamweaver, and I believe Notepad has the drop down as well, where you can drop down and you can see all of this, these options for the attributes. So this one, we're just going to do background. So we're going to set a background color for this one, and we're going to make it blue. So it's going to really stand out there. And also we're going to add an additional one. So we're just going to do color, and color is just going to set the color of the text. So if that's blue, we want to make the text white.
Man, oh man, this is killing me. All right. Let me see here. I'm gonna end the class a little early, only because we're having these consistent playback issues, and this is pissing me off. I do want us to review, though, what we learned today about HTML, and I want us to do it together with a few minutes. I'll say like the next 10 minutes of the class. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's play with some HTMLs. 4 and 5. All right. Introduction to HTML. At its heart, HTML is a language made of elements which can be applied to pieces of text to give them different meaning in a document. All right. Don't really care too much about these. Marking up a letter. Let's run through an assessment real quick. Actually, what are these? This module contains the following, which will take you through all the basic theory of HTML. Actually, no, let's run through one of these. Some of these. Are these all guides over different topics? Cool. Prerequisites: basic computer literacy, basic software install, basic knowledge of working with files. Sheesh. All right. My cat is very grumpy. If we wanted the text to stand by itself, we could specify that as a paragraph by enclosing a paragraph tag. Anatomy of HTML element. Let's further explore our paragraph element from the previous section. Opening tag, closing tag, content, and all of that together makes an HTML element. Opening tag. This consists of the name of the element, wrapped in opening and closing angle brackets. This opening tag marks where the element starts. The content is the content, self-explanatory. Closing tag. This is the same as the opening tag, except that it includes a / before the element name. So this is important to go over only because VS Code is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. And it's important that even though VS Code has a lot of lovely features to make sure that we do not mess up our code. If you ever do a whiteboard interview or have to like code without an actual editor, computer, you will struggle if you do not have the practice or knowledge or know-how of these very minor things. I will promise you 90% of developers' coding issues is going to be something so minuscule that the human eye is skipping over it as a closing tag. And it is very frustrating to have to like stare at code for 3 hours and figure out where did you put that one little thing wrong. So yeah, very important to understand the minor differences between these. We already created multiple HTML elements. So let's talk about nesting elements. Elements can be placed within other elements. This is called nesting. If we want to state that our cat is very grumpy, but we could wrap the word very in a strong element, which means that the word is to have stronger text formatting. My cat is strong, very strong, grumpy. This is just gonna, as we saw, make this bold. The important part about nesting, there's a right or wrong way to do nesting. In the example above, we open the P element first, then open the strong element. For proper nesting, we should close the strong element first before closing the P. The following is an example of the wrong way to do nesting. And then P, my cat is strong, very grumpy, close P, close strong. The tags have to open and close in a way that they are inside or outside one another with a kind of overlap. In the example above, the browser has to guess at your intent. This kind of guessing can result in unexpected results. And we do not like unexpected results because that usually breaks your code. The next thing I want to mention about nesting elements is when we look at HTML structure on the page, it's really just all nested elements. Like we saw when we call inspect to open our Chrome Dev Tools, you'll see elements nested under element, nested under element, nested under element, nested under element. That is essentially how we build all code. little pieces of building blocks, all working together, wrapped up in one large product or service or design. Block versus inline elements. This is some good developer language to understand. There are two important categories of elements to know in HTML: block level elements and inline elements. Block level elements form a visible block on a page. A block level element appears on a new line following the content that precedes it. Any content that follows a block level element also appears on a new line. Block level elements are usually structural elements on the page. For example, a block level element might represent headings, paragraph lists, navigation menus, or footers. A block level element wouldn't be nested inside an inline element, but it might be nested inside another block level element. Inline elements are contained within block line elements and surround only small parts of the document's content, not entire paragraphs or grouping of content. An inline element will not cause a new line to appear in the document. It is typically used with text. For example, an A tag, which is a hyperlink, creates a hyperlink. An element such as M or strong creates emphasis. Consider the following example: M, first M, M second M, M third M, and then some paragraph tags wrap around fourth, fifth, and sixth. So we see the inline elements, they do not cause the content within it to be presented on the page as their own line. They can all share the same line. The block level elements, however, like page tags, they have default spacing. This spacing is due to default CSS styling that the browser applies to the paragraph. So these browsers like Chrome, Opera, Mozilla, et cetera, and also that's why we go through the Mozilla docs, is because the Mozilla docs itself is explaining how the browser is going to handle receiving this coding language. So when the browser receives P tags, it automatically renders it onto the page with styling because it understands to present P tags or P elements as such. Not all elements follow the pattern of an opening tag, content, and a closing tag. Some elements consist of a single tag, which is typically used to insert/embed something in the document. For example, the image element embeds an image file onto a page. So this image does not have a closing tag. It's just image, and then the source, and then boom, 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 outputs this. Plenty of other examples as well. I believe JavaScript does that, and CDNs. Attributes. Elements can also have attributes. Attributes look like this. You can make your custom attribute, or you can have the set ones on the element. Attributes contain extra information about the element that won't appear in the content. In this example, the class attribute is an identifying name used to target the element with style information. Each attribute that's not custom made by you have a specific purpose for the element. So class attributes, they generally are for identifying the element, a part of a group or class of elements. Sorry about that.
They're going crazy over there.
Yeah, they are. It's the day after Cinco de Mayo. But yeah. So the attribute, with the attribute, there's also ID, which cannot be shared. IDs are unique specifically to one tag. So it's important for us to learn these attributes, the specific attributes of these elements when we're using them. An attribute should have a space between it and the element name, the attribute name followed by an equal sign, and an attribute value wrapped with opening and closing quote marks. Another example of an element is A. This stands for anchor. An anchor can make the text it encloses into a hyperlink. Anchors can take a number of attributes, but several are as follows. So these are the specific attributes for anchors: href, title, and target. Href, this attribute value specifies the web address, aka the link. Title is going to specify extra information about the link, such as the description of the page that is being linked to. For example, title equal the Mozilla homepage. And then target attribute specifies the browsing context used to display the link. For example, target equal blank will display the link in a new tab. So you can control how your links link to things. You can even link to an element on the same page rather than link to an external path, like a different website. So these are things that they want us to obviously do and practice, but since we are ending the class, we won't have the time to go through all of these. But please find time to practice, take some time and run through these and make sure that you feel comfortable just writing out some elements. Ideally, you should make out a list of elements in your index.html file. Next, Boolean attributes. So the Boolean stands for truthy or falsy. It evaluates whether something is true or false. Sometimes you'll see attributes written without values. This is entirely acceptable. These are called Boolean attributes. Boolean attributes can only have one value, which is generally the same as the attribute name. For example, consider the disabled attribute, which you can assign to form input elements. You can use this to disable the form input element so that the user can't make any entries. The disabled elements typically have a grayed out appearance. So looking at this, disabled equals a text that says disabled. As a shorthand, it is acceptable to write this as followed. Disabled, when you write it like this, it's a Boolean and it automatically evaluates to true. Versus if you don't write anything, it's not disabled. This is disabled over here on the left. And this is not disabled over here. Next is omitting quotes around attribute values. If you look at code for a lot of other sites, you might come across a number of strange markup styles, including attribute values without quotes. This is permitted in certain circumstances, but it can also break your markup in other circumstances. For example, if we revisit our link earlier, we could write a basic version with only the href attribute like this, where straight equals these values. However, as soon as we add title attribute in this way, there are problems. Why? Because title has spaces. It doesn't know how to read the space. As written above, the browser misinterprets the markup, mistaking the title attribute for 3 attributes. A title attribute with the value the and 2 Boolean attributes, Mozilla and homepage. Obviously, this is not intended. It will cause errors or unexpected behavior. As you can see in the live example below, try hovering over the link. So I don't know if you can see, but over here in the bottom, you're going to see a little pop-up of what this is linking to. So this is linking to Mozilla.org. This also seems to be, that's what's happening. So this is the second one with the link to the title and only the is being covered versus this one where there's no title, just href. Always include the attribute quotes. It avoids such problems and results in more readable code. Single or double quotes. Code is very specific. They have guidelines for everything. In this article, you'll notice that the attribute are wrapped in double quotes. However, you might see single quotes in some HTML code. This is a matter of style. You can feel free to choose whichever one you prefer. That is false. Choose double quotes. Reserve single quotes for when you have to write something inline inside of your double quotes. That way someone else can read that this thing is being quoted. So try to reserve the single quotes for representing quotes inside of double quotes. Make sure you don't mix single quotes and double quotes. This example below shows a kind of mixing quotes that will go wrong. They have one double quote and one single quote. This is not readable to the document. However, if you use one type of quote, you can include the other type of quote inside your attribute values. So using the title with the double quotes allows you to use a single quote here, which is why we want to reserve the single quote. If you try to use it with single quotes and then use the single quote again, you break up the markup because it thinks single quote to single quote, and it'll cover that, and then that will not be covered for the rest of it. Instead, you can do this. So since this is compiled, there's ways for us to break out of, there's ways for us to encode what we're trying to deliver to HTML. And this is, I'll be honest with you, this is unnecessary. You do not necessarily want to use HTML entities, but there are HTML entities that exist that will evaluate as like spaces, will evaluate as quotes, as well as all these other things, ampersands and arrows. So yeah. We only have 2 minutes. I do want to stop. I think this is helpful for start. Please get through this document. And then when we come back, we'll go through some more HTML and watch more of the videos and hopefully get through the rest of the videos. All right, appreciate y'all.